Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the LiftAffect podcast. I am your host, Matt McNeil, founder, clinical director, and director of human performance at LiftAffect, where we assist professional pilots with maintaining better mental health and optimizing their mental skills. The goal of this podcast is simple: to help pilots and other high liability professionals and disciplines come out of the shadows to discover how we can live better lives personally and professionally. Join us each episode as we discuss various topics ranging from mental health, mental skills and performance, to business, entrepreneurship, and a few other surprises along the way.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the LiftAffect podcast, where we're like a box of chocolates. You just never know what you're going to get.
Oh, I thought you were going to say I'm like Forrest Gump.
No. Run, Forrest, run.
It's me.
You know,
That's
it's
me.
like somebody like saying, you know, like
Forrest Gump of podcasts.
Yeah, there you go. It's like somebody saying, I'm armed security. I say, well, what's armless security look like?
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah. So, how the heck are you doing, buddy?
I'm good. We had this has been a busy week, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. It has.
A lot of activities.
And we're getting, finally, I can see the weekend on the horizon. I haven't even shaved. I mean, I feel like I'm just a bum.
Well,
on the other hand.
you know.
Yeah, well.
The shoe fits.
You know, you live the lifestyle, you got to look it.
Yeah, well, I'm not much to look at either, so, I shouldn't be talking.
Yeah, whatever,
Yeah.
I could just see, like I said, people just, I can't wait until we do our YouTube channel where people can look at you and go like, what is Bill Mayer doing on this?
I know. What is Bill Mayer? I had a client say to me that they looked you up, Karl, and they were like, that's not what he's supposed to look like. I've been listening to him for months, and it's funny how you build in your mind what you think somebody's going to look like, and I thought that was
the question
funny.
is, I'd like to know what he thought or she thought.
I'm like, what did he think?
What did you think?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
He's not quite the man I thought he was.
Why does the guy have a cat on his head? I don't understand what's going on.
Or you know what? They looked up a different one.
You got the wrong Karl. You got the wrong guy.
Why does he live in Moldova?
Yeah, probably. I didn't check that with him. Maybe he did have the wrong one.
Who knows?
That's funny.
Or God, he's awfully rich.
Yep. Yeah. Why is he hanging out with you? Yeah. He's just out here slumming it with the exactly.
Just trying to give back to the common folk.
Yep. Indeed.
Oh my
He's
Lord.
in his mansion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God! I just water all over myself.
Oh,
okay. Anyways,
so
what do we got?
So what the heck are we here for now?
Yeah, what are we here for? What are we here for?
I don't know.
What's come in? What the cat drag in?
Well, oh boy, you leave a lot of openings. Let's see. A lot of our
openings,
listener comments and thoughts revolve around the aviation aspect, and that's primarily what we're here for. But some of them do talk about, because we had always said that we deal with other professional lifestyles, and we also talk about the entrepreneurship or solopreneurs and stuff. So we have some business stuff, because mindset and all the things that go with that are part of what we want to be able to talk about. And one of the comments was, basically, I'm paraphrasing. They said, "How do you deal with?" Because you talked about CEOs and how you work with them, and how much success you've had, and what kind of people might, like a profile of who they are. But what happens when you work with someone and it doesn't work, or it's not turning out the way there's the conflict, the problems that they're trying to resolve or deal with aren't there. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so I've had success and I've had plenty of failures too. So I like to always think about baseball players. I love baseball. A lot of even do some work with baseball players on mental skills coaching. But baseball is a very successful batter is misses 70% of the time. Like the most successful. Even pretty good is you miss 80% of the time. And I kind of try to aim low for myself. I don't, but seriously, I mean, like failures is where you learn everything. You don't learn from successes, you learn from failures. And I've had plenty of engagements that were not successful or didn't move the needle. And it really depends on what were the metrics with which I was being held to move them, whether was it increase their profit margins or decrease their expenses or help them with increasing market share, or if it was just totally interpersonal, like, this person just needs to be able to lead better. So it really depends on what was the metric, what was the performance indicator, they call them KPIs, that I, as the coach, the strategic thinking partner, is being brought in to help with. But where I think we're most, should we just use like CEOs as an example? Like publicly traded companies?
Yeah.
Because entrepreneurs are but it's kind of the same. I would think there's some subtle differences. But let's talk about it from like an emotional, psychological perspective, because I think people can relate to this that are listening. You don't have to be a CEO, or just think about your own life. But we're talking about leading when you have to lead, whether you're leading your friend group, or you're leading your family, or you're leading your peer group, or you're leading your business. Maybe you're leading the flight deck. There's certain things that happen where if the CEO is not willing to budge, I cannot be effective for them. The engagement does not go well. They don't grow as a leader. And my job is to either correct, at its worst, is to correct bad behavior, help them correct bad behavior, or at their best is to help them just learn to flourish more. I like the engagements. I don't like being brought in to correct a bad behavior. That's sort of a drag, because I feel like coaching is for winners. It's not for losers. It's not, okay, you're mandated to get this because you're not behaving. It's sort of like being drug into the pro stands office or to the chief pilot's office. It's like, that's a drag, because they don't want to be there, or there's some kind of ambivalence about being there. And I typically say no to those kinds of engagements. If the executive does not really want this, there's no point in me showing up. They don't want to talk to me. But here's universally, whether it's a corrective action or they just want to grow, there's a few fundamental things that, in my experience, have to be there. One is the client needs to be open to the engagement, open to what they're engaging in their company, open to how they're engaging with others. And what that means to me is you have to be willing to accept some level of criticism. And that's really hard to do. It's hard for all of us to accept criticism. It hurts. We take it personally and we feel very defensive. What are your...
I would agree with you. I think people have to be open to accepting the fact that what they thought or how they were running things or doing things is either is wrong or needs to have some level of change done to it, because what they're getting isn't what needs to be gotten. And the way I look at it, sometimes people are so entrenched in their way of thought on something. It's like I've told people, I said, it's really hard when you think about something so much, or you're trying to work something. After a while, that's the only way you see it. It's like that's the road you've driven on, and you don't see any of these other options. And that's when I've gone out and said, hey, can you help me, because I'm only seeing it this way. And if they're not open to going, hey, there are other ways to skin this cat or things, and they go, my way's the only way, or this is the only way it can be done, there's no other way, that's when it's tough. They have to be open to looking at going, there are other ways, or the way I was doing it needs to be improved or changed, because what's for this situation, even if it's a good thing, a good way, it's not working here.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of it is just biological. I mean, if you think about like when we are experiencing some criticism, the mind, we have this little thing called an amygdala. It's this little almond-shaped gland in our brain, and that is it's there to protect you. It's like it arms all the guns. It brings out all the defenses of freeze, fight, or run. And we are biologically adapted to be living. I mean, we haven't evolved very much in about 2 million years, and we were living.
Give it another week or two.
Well, give it another week or two, right? Yeah, but I mean, well, the world's evolving so much faster than we are, which is part of the problem.
Oh yes.
But it's like when we feel a threat, our amygdala goes nuts, and it sounds an alarm, and our entire system prepares for survival. It just above all else. That's why we get so hooked by criticism. It's like the guns come out, and part of it is like, dude, it's not your fault. You know, your system is wired up to be trying to avoid the saber-toothed tiger that's trying to eat you. And so you've got to be able to overcome that, because, you know, and sometimes I have to really explain to a particular CEO or executive, I should say. It's not always CEOs. There's many levels of executives.
Who I'm sure have always have been successful.
They're always successful. And they, you know, maybe the less evolved ones, you got to explain to them, hey, listen, just so you know, you're not in physical danger. Sometimes that they're just like, oh, okay. Yeah, like I understand you're activated, but like you're not being chased by a tiger right now. There aren't saber-toothed tigers roaming the campus of your corporate office headquarters, right? There's no tigers here, right? And so,
or if there are, I'm not sure I want to be there.
Right. Just like that little reminder is like, you know, you're not being attacked. Savvy ones, that they've worked through this. But if you think about the job of an executive, they're there to be looking for threats, because they got to grow the business. They have to manage threats. So they're kind of ginned up to be looking for threats. But if they can't get over if they close off anytime that there's some kind of feedback that feels critical, that's not you're awesome, you're amazing, that's a pretty telltale sign I'm not going to be able to help them. Because what I'm trying to do is get them to become more open. You've got to become more open.
I would imagine that a number of I don't know how many of the people you work with, that in many cases, all they've ever known is success. So dealing with an obstacle or this could be like one of the first or few times they've had failure, and how do they deal with it, because they've never had to.
When you go to Harvard Business School and you graduate at the top of your class, and you were you worked your way up very quickly, and you're high net worth, and you're put in command of a lot of people and a lot of money and steering market share, and there's shareholders, and you're kind of used to being the captain. You're like, yeah, I get paid to be right all the time.
Supreme confidence.
Huge confidence, huge ego. I think pilots have big egos, not even close. I mean, say pro athletes too. I mean, these guys are the best of, the odds of making it to the big leagues are just like, 1 in 80,000. It's like, and so you're there because you're good, and you're really good. But the problem is, once you get to, and I've talked about this in the past, when you get at the supreme level, like everybody's good. And so what is going to set you aside? What's going to separate you from the rest? I think it's the ability to overcome criticism so that you can approach it openly. That's the first. That is what separates the big dogs from the medium-sized dogs. And just even your own sort of ego states in your life, when you become the big dog from an ego state or a medium-sized dog, it's when you overcome that little threat alarm that just goes haywire when somebody criticizes you. Yesterday we had a meeting in the V1 project that was I thought it was a really powerful meeting with all cohorts, and one of our members, which hopefully I think we're going to have on the podcast at some point. We're going to interview him. He's told this really amazing story about how he showed up and was called out on, hey, are you really showing up like for others? Are you bringing the best of what you have to offer? And, he had realized in that moment he was not showing up in the way that he was capable. And part of it was because what allowed him to transform was he was open to the criticism. He opened himself up and became vulnerable to the criticism. And if a executive is just not willing to be open to criticism, it's going to be it's going to be a failed engagement. It's not going to work. So that's one piece I think is you have to overcome. The second one is if there's a lack of curiosity, it's really difficult. I mean, think about trying to work with somebody to help them develop and they're not curious. What would that be like?
I that for me is a challenge, but I feel like I've also seen some that they're so focused in what their objective is that they don't have time for curiosity.
Well, that's actually the third part. But yeah, say more about that. Just riff on that for a second.
It's like, I get it. You have something you want to do, but it's like to the exclusion of everything else. And it makes it really difficult to work with somebody or to talk with them because that's their only focus. And so when you're talking about something else, it's like literally like when I'm talking to my kids sometimes and they're playing a game, you might as well be talking to a rock. You're not going to get anything out of them because they're focused on that and that to the exclusion of all else. So I don't know that people aren't curious. The question is, what you think they should be curious about, or what you would think would be something that someone would be curious about, isn't curious to them, or at least definitely not on the terms, in this case, the time frame that you're expecting or liking or thinking they should be.
Yeah,
I don't know if that
I
answers
think,
that.
Well, here's what a big telltale sign of where there's a lack of curiosity. If you are committed to being right, you cannot commit to learning, getting a different perspective. That's a big problem. That's a triple chime. And it's really easy. You ask when I go in and I talk to when I'm initially, being prospected to for an engagement. They shop around. They interview several different strategists to who to work with, and one of the questions I'll ask them is, so when we're operating at our best, we are open, we are curious, we are committed to, I always say there's not winners and losers, there's winners and learners. We're committed to learning. And when we are really not operating optimally, we are defensive, we are closed up, we have to be right all the time, and they all agree, right? Yeah, totally. And it's really simple. It's ask them, where are you? And if they say, oh, I'm always open and I'm learning, I'm done with them. It's like, if you can't even admit that there are times where you are closed up, you are defensive, you become absolutely committed to being right. And any C-level executive that does not admit, oh yeah, I come in like a freight train with being right sometimes, if they can't admit that, they're just not that serious about wanting to self-improve. We all have moments where we are operating and so in mental skills, right, I call it resourced or unresourced. When I am unresourced, I am closed up, I am committed, I am tunnel visioned, I am closed off, and it's the pinhole because I'm in a freeze, fight, or run state. And I get in that state. We all get in those states. If you can't admit that sometimes you go into that, you're just not that evolved. That is a big litmus test, even for yourself. Are there times where you are operating in a unresourced manner? If you can't admit to that, and say, is there opportunity for you to improve? It's going to be pretty hard to benefit from any kind of coaching.
I spent 30 years in the military, and I've had commanders that would say to me, my bosses would say, yeah, I have an open door policy, and I always want to hear what you have to bring forth. But as soon as you did that, it was like, I don't want to hear your opinion. I want to hear you say my opinion and regurgitate it back to me. It's like, if I've already made up my mind. I really just need you to agree so I can say, yeah, my subordinates agree with me. The best commander I ever had said to me, come in, talk to me. If you have a problem, bring me what you think the solution is, and we'll talk about it. There's only two things I want from you. One is when we've made the decision, or where I've made the decision after I've listened to everything, we own it together, and don't ever lie to me. Those were and so I truly had an open door where we were able to talk about things, and sometimes things that he didn't agree with, but he took it and we would talk about it in a constructive manner. And I was so appreciative of that, because the goal was to get to a better place, to get to a better answer, or as good an answer as possible. And it's not saying that my CEO from the company, my airline, is going to expect me to walk through the door, but I'm hoping that his senior leaders, executive team, has the ability to walk in there and go, boss, I'm not sure, I'm seeing something here. Are we on the right path? Can we talk about it, versus going, yeah, we're on the right path. Just get back to doing what you're doing. That, I think, is a big challenge, where you're running the risk of going down a very bad path, because you're not going to make 100% of your decisions that are going to be right.
That's right. I think that awareness is a huge thing for me in the work that I do, is really preaching awareness. Knowing when you're unresourced, when you're closed off, is more important than being closed off. That actually, just knowing when it's happening.
Yep.
Because if you, and this is rampant in the business world, where it is this like, I am right, I am not interested in any sort of criticism. There's a generational problem too, I think, with this. We've touched on it before, is a lot of the younger generation they have no coping skills around any kind of criticism. And when you're not even aware of that, that's a very, very dangerous place. That is more dangerous than actually just being closed off. You need to know, because if you don't know that it's a problem, then you have no motivation to shift. You have no motivation to try to learn, something. You're basically unconscious. It's like you're not even knowing. Yeah, you're on autopilot. So I think building awareness is a really important skill that we all have. Before you try to find the corrective action to fix it, are you even aware when you're doing it?
Do you know there's a problem?
Do you know there's a problem? I remember one time I was in this meeting, in this board meeting with this guy that I was working with, and it was kind of like a 360 feedback review, and there's all these people in there, and he is coming unglued with this, and he's standing up and he's yelling, and he's just completely unhinged, totally unresourced, right? Just freeze, fight, or run. Amygdala is just going wild. Tiger's in the room with him. And I said to him, are you aware that he's just screaming and yelling? And I instructed everybody there, just be quiet. Just let him do this until he runs out of steam. And I said to him, are you aware that you're the only person here that's standing? And it was like, he kind of looked around the room and realized he was standing and everybody else was sitting. And I think that was a key moment for him, where just even the physicality of what was going on. I didn't even want to get into the emotional piece or the metrics or whether it's right or wrong. Just reminding him, like, are you aware that you're just standing? He wasn't even aware that he was standing and pounding his fists on the table. And it really freaked him out. It totally, it was like a bucket of ice water, where it was like, he was like, oh my, I'm not aware that I'm the only person that's standing in the room. It hadn't even crossed his mind. And it was like he sat down and then the work began. It's like it was the way to just like, okay, let's rip this defense down in a way that he can approach this, he can understand. And then he started to move from unresourced over to resource. Because what happened was, what did he start to do? He started to open up. He started to become curious. And then he understood that there was probably something here that he might, that is new, that could offer him something new. And he started to get more into a curiosity mindset than a closed, fixed one. And then we're getting into mindset, right? Fixed versus growth. Yep. Where is that?
I'm going to do a little bit of a redirect because getting back to the core question, what are about when it doesn't work with a CEO? My question, I'll rephrase it or ask mine would be, you obviously, when you initially sit down with one, you ask some key questions that do a lot of the separating, is this someone I want to work with or not? And they go, are you somebody that they want to work with or not? Okay, let's just say you've gotten past that first, both of you say, yeah, we want to work together. Are there any common threads, or what happens, what causes someone that you said, okay, I can work with you, to later find out, you know what, we gave it our best shot. This isn't working out for you, for me, or for both of us.
Yeah, it might not be the best for them. I think if you realize that you got the KPIs wrong, if as in the work, you realize that your targets were off, where it was like, you know what, this actually isn't what you need. What you need is this, and I can't provide that for you. That's something that can come up, where you're like, I think our original targets were off. And
usually, how far into that kind of a relationship do you get?
Yeah, it depends on the length of the engagement. But let's say if it's a year, it's quarterly. We have KPIs of, quarterly KPIs. And sometimes you realize, you know what, I think this is not actually where the work is. We need to pivot what we're focusing on. And if you can't make the pivot, sometimes you make the pivot together and you're like, okay, let's redirect this. But if I can't offer them, if I don't have the expertise to take them, from here to there, because we measured it incorrectly, that is a place where I've got to bow out.
I get the feeling that the majority of the time it's you that just says, you know what, this isn't working. I'm not the right person for you. How often has the executive that you're working with going, you know what, love you, but probably you're not for me?
Yeah, I've learned over the years to be very, very careful in the consultation phase. Before you get into this, you really need to know what you're trying to work on. And also sometimes you have to have some latitude of saying, look, this is a kind of an experiment. We've got to see where this takes us, and really communicating about that throughout. Where it's probably 80-20, meaning 80% is when I'll say, I don't think this is going to work, because I'm constantly scanning for viability, and I'm looking at, they're not doing that. They're busy. That's not what, and they're not trained to do that. But it was probably the other way when I first started out, because I wasn't learning I just didn't know, it was all new, and I wasn't sure how much fluidity there is in it. But I would say now it's usually all initial. I'll say, I don't feel like I'm really helping this situation, or it's one of these other issues where they're really unresourced all the time, and they're not interested in having some vulnerability to grow. I'm like, this is going to be kind of a waste. Yeah, the money's great, but I would rather just, free myself up to help somebody that I can actually help.
When you start with someone and you both say, yeah, we want to work with each other, do you give them is there a typical time frame that you give, saying, hey, this is going to take we're going to work on this for a year?
I won't do coaching
what?
engagements that are less than a year at this point.
So they have an expectation right up front.
Yeah.
This is a marathon. This is not a sprint.
That's right. It's a year. And the reason that it takes a year is because change does not happen overnight. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. It's the decision to change can be instantaneous, but to implement the changes takes time. And you've got to be able to implement, you got to be able to measure, you've got to then be able to adjust and then pivot, implement, measure, adjust, make the pivots, implement, to kind of hone in on whether this is working. And it takes time, as we talk about in V1. If you want to establish a habit, there's a period of willpower to continue to implement and grind through. You got to be able to get through the grind through. We talked about that in the book that I covered with Jason Selk's book. There's this period of just, you've got to keep your head down and push through the push-throughs to be able to then create actual habitual change. So I just won't do it for less than a year. It's not, with the way I work, it's not setting up a recipe for success.
Obviously this is a business, but you're trying to help someone with their business. And when it doesn't work out, it's not personal. It is what it is. Has there ever been an arrangement between you and someone that it didn't work out, where you were caught off guard, and I can't say it was personal, but it affected you in a way that it wasn't just, hey, it's business? Did you ever have anything like that?
Yeah. Oh, early on, I certainly did, especially at the lower level engagements. You had people that just kind of peter out, or they just change their mind, or they're sleeping with somebody else, whatever. But I think the more you do it, and the more you start to really target where you're good, your skill set is, who you work with, and you become very careful, and you really are thorough in the initial stages of even becoming engaged. You just learn who's a good partner to work with and who's not. That's much less frequent, and certainly depends on the contract that you have. The level of contract. I used to work with no contracts at all. It was just like, what? And in some respects, I'm kind of like that, still like that. I don't, my contracts could probably be a lot more shored up. But my feeling is, if you don't want to work with me, then I don't want to hold you over a barrel with a gun, and I don't want you to hold me over the barrel with a gun either. So if the desire to, and that's a therapeutic piece, is there's common factors of therapy, of what makes therapy effective. Now, coaching is not therapy, and we should really, at some point, I'm getting a lot of questions about that. We'll have an episode on that. What is the difference? But one of the models of a good of therapy is the relationship. If the relationship is not there, and the rationale for being there, those have to be there, or it will not work. It doesn't matter how great the stuff that you're bringing in there is, it won't work. So you learn to measure those things very quickly, and it's usually it's like a slam dunk, where like, I really want to work with this person, they really want to work with me. There's a lot of synergy. We're really kind of flowing at the same rate, and we want to be there together. But that just takes a lot of time. Oh yeah, I'd gotten things just all of a sudden canceled, or this and that, and it was very interpersonally painful, and I had to. They probably started
to avoid you, I bet.
Well, or they just cancel. They're just like, bang.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. To me, that's avoidance.
Yeah, it was painful, and you're like, well, you take it very personally, and you become unresourced, and then you lose the curiosity. You become defensive, and that just doesn't lead to anything. So I had to really learn to become like a scientist of like, okay, this is interesting. Well, let's look at what happened here. And then you go back and you're like, oh my God, there was a ton of signs that this was not going to work.
I remember you saying something to me that has stuck with me, that I thought it's very simple, but it really is very profound to me, which is, I can't want it more than you.
Yep. I really
when I'm wanting it more than you want it, the roles have been reversed, and
then I'm doing the work, right? I mean, I'm like,
it's unhealthy.
It's super unhealthy. And it's a very fine line. And I will say to them, I'm feeling like I'm wanting this more than you. And so I'm going to back off, and then I'm going to let you squirm for a little bit. But
you've also said I think that the role between a coach and a consultant also makes a difference. When you're a consultant, you're now part of the wanting and the doing, because you're
doing the work
in the dirt. Yeah, you're doing as a work. Coach, you're not doing the work.
No.
So when you're wanting it more as a coach, that's where it becomes extremely unhealthy. And
right.
And they're now expecting you to be something other than what you are there for.
That's right.
That's it. Like I said, that I think is very important is how much do they want it? Because you're there to facilitate it, not to. That's right. And look,
I had a CEO of an airline. They know way more about that than I do. I don't know anything. I mean, like I've learned a lot along the way, but it's like, or a CEO of another company like that. I'm not an expert in their business. They went to business school. That's not. I will never know their business, like not even close. And I don't pretend to do that. I'm there to help them to become more effective. So me doing the work is not going to help them. That's just becoming one of their, people that does their work for them. That's not what I'm going to do.
I don't know if this would be a reality, but once you have that breakthrough with them, I could see some of them abdicating, because now you've broken through that shell of supreme confidence and all that, and now they start maybe either self-doubt, questioning everything, and going, well, what should I do? Or what do you think? Instead of going, I'm going to provide you with these tools, and the decision is still yours. They start abdicating, and now all of a sudden they've kind of done role reversal without even realizing it.
Yeah.
I could imagine. I don't know if you've ever had that, but I could see that happening.
And we talk and we work through it. I mean, but I think once you get through some of the pain points, it's amazing. The relationship is deeply meaningful. It's meaningful to me. I mean, I have some coaching clients I've worked with for 7 years. I have one particular client I talk to almost every day for 5 minutes. That's part of it just works for him. I'll come in once a quarter for a day and just, spend time. But the relationships are very meaningful, like really.
Instead of speed dating, you're speed coaching.
Sometimes it's just that we have a morning check-in of what's going on. And that just is what works for him. He doesn't have the patience to sit for 30 minutes on a call. He just can't. He can't do it. He's too busy. He's too ADD. Just doesn't work. But 5 minutes is the sweet spot for him, or 7 minutes is kind of and we have our morning ritual, it's just, and that's a really deeply meaningful relationship. And we've really helped him build his what he's doing tremendously. And he's built himself as a person, and
cool.
It's awesome work. So,
well, I think we're near the end, or at the end. What is the one takeaway?
Know where you are. And if you don't recognize times where you are being closed, you're being defensive, you're being married to this idea that you have to be right. If you're not aware of that, you need to get aware of it, because we all have those moments because of biology. And just having some awareness will allow you then to become more open, to become more curious, and to put that lab coat on and be the scientist so you can actually learn something new. There's the minute you stop learning, I think you're done. And so I think just to grab some awareness of, what, I'm really operating in a closed state here. I need to try to open this up. That's a tremendous, empowering, realization. That's a superpower that we all have. You can harness it, but you gotta be a little vulnerable to sort of self-assess. That's my one thing.
I have to tell you, every time I get on the podcast with you, I walk away very humbled, because there's so much that I learn from all of this. It just amazes me that every time I think I have a solid understanding of things, there is so much more to it. So,
well, I think you give me too much credit, man.
But
I sit in this stuff all day. So,
yeah, but I'm not speaking for our viewers and listeners, which I hope are getting something similar. I can speak for myself that it's just, it's amazing how much you don't know about something you thought you knew.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
it's tons. And I appreciate sharing space with you too, buddy. I mean, it's
Yeah.
I get probably more out of it than you do. So
Well,
I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, I love you, man.
Love you, man.
Yeah. So what
All right.
chocolate did you pick out of the box today?
Yeah. I picked, it's Friday and I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
That's what I picked.
So, with all that, keep talking to to everybody about us. Please leave your comments, your views, your likes, your dislikes. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a review. You are the reason why we're here, even though we joke with each other. You are the reason why. So, and we thank you for all the comments that you send our way. So, with that being said, we hope you have a great day, and we can't wait to see you on our next podcast. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the LiftAffect podcast. If you want to dive deeper into this episode and every episode, go to our website, liftaffect.com/podcast. If you're enjoying the show, we would love it if you'd follow us on Spotify and rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate your support. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, all with the ID Matthew McNeil. This show is brought to you by LiftAffect, a clinical mental health and consulting company that assists air carriers, corporate flight departments, pilot unions, and commercial pilots by providing comprehensive psychotherapy and mental skills coaching services to pilots with mental health and mental performance-related issues. Visit liftaffect.com, that's LiftAffect.com, to book your free consultation. And finally, this podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practice of counseling, psychotherapy, medicine, or any other healthcare service, including the giving of medical advice. No therapeutic or provider-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and any materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional psychological advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining advice for any psychological or medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the LiftAffect podcast.